So this week we have a lot of ground to cover, and I want to begin with the parsha of Parah that we read, the second portion that we read about the purification ritual in which a red heifer was to be used. Its ashes were to be sprinkled with special spring water and herbs on people, and on day 3 you'd be sprinkled, and on day 7, and then you'd be cleansed, and you'd be able to enter the temple for the ritual of Passover and various other times. You were unable to go in unless you were absolutely certain that you were cleansed, and hence the excavations outside the temple, even now, the Temple Mount, of many mikvahs, of many different ritual baths that would have been used for people to purify themselves. And in some communities it's still present. Some of the Hasidic communities, the mikvah, still very much alive in terms of women's ritual health and so on. But here's the very strange thing about the ritual of the red heifer. You would imagine that an item or something, material, or an ingredient that could purify should certainly purify the person who's distributing it. So the priest in ancient times in Jewish life, and don't confuse this with Christianity, it's similar, but it might even be the source. But think about this. Here's the priest at the temple, the Jewish priest. He takes water out of this bowl. It has all these ingredients in it, the ashes, the hyssop, some of the blood, and so on and so forth. And he takes it and he sprinkles it on people. You would imagine that the person who is sprinkling is certainly pure if the person who is sprinkled is pure. But the text tells us something extraordinary, which is the person who distributes the purifying becomes impure. So after distributing that water to people to purify them, they become pure after a week, and the person who distributes it becomes impure and has to go through the ritual himself to cleanse themselves, which sounds exactly counterintuitive. But that is the story of this week's portion of the Parah. It's actually not necessarily about cleansing or getting ready for Passover. For me particularly, it's a story in which those who do the cleansing for others ultimately become unclean by others. And it's important to understand that this is the role and nature of leadership. Eventually, you will become tarnished with the brush that you cleanse with. That is just the way it is, and you have to accept that as a leader. And we find more about leadership in this week's portion with Moshe. When we go to the portion of the week, Parsha Ki Tisa, there's an incredible moment in which Moshe says to God, leadership is lonely. It is hard to lead a people. It is hard to be in charge. The commandments, the obligations, the grumbling, the anger, the hurt, the infighting, the politics, I can't do it on my own. I need to know who you are, God. I have to have a relationship if I am to lead the people. I need to know that you're not just some abstract voice. I need to see you. And in an extraordinary text in this week's portion, God says, you cannot see me. A human being cannot see me. I do not have a form that is capable of being seen by humanity. If you do see me, you will die. Not possible. So they negotiate. Moses says, I have to have a relationship. I can't do this abstract thing like talking to a camera. I can't do it. So God says, all right, compromise. I will pass by in this narrow passage between two large rocks or cliffs. And when I go by, you'll see the back of my head. Whatever that means, kivayachol, which means if we can even imagine. What does it mean to see the back of God's head? But let's say Moses says, okay, fine, I will do that. And the commandment is, Moses, you go, v'nitzavta b'nikrat hatzur, and you will stand in the cleft of the rock. And by standing in the cleft of the rock, when I go past you, you won't get crushed, because my presence will just consume whatever is in its way. But if you're in the cleft of the rock, you're hidden, and you could see me as I go by, just the back of my head. whatever. This is the drama that's playing out in this week's portion. Moses says, I don't want the loneliness of leadership. God says, you can't have me. Moses, they negotiate, fine. And then we ask ourselves, what was this cleft in the rock? Was this cleft in the rock a natural form? Was it a formation that had always existed? And God says, oh, there happens to be a convenient cleft in the rock. Well, actually, let's think about what had just happened. Moses had been told by God, you broke the 10 commandments that I gave to the people. You went on this rampage. You were angry at them. You broke the gift that I gave them. Now go, psalecha shnei luchot avanim karishonim. Go carve out 2 new tablets like the first ones that I gave them. But no, you can't have a stonemason do it. You can't have a professional. You can't call someone. You have to take a chisel and get up early in the morning and chisel out the rock and give yourself 2 new tablets like the ones that you broke. V'heyeh nechonim laboker. You should be ready in the morning and come up to the mountain and begin carving the mountain. Moses himself had to go up and carve the mountain. And friends, that is where the little cleft in the rock came from. Not by accident, not by nature, but through hard work and effort and compensation by Moses for his deeds. So now Moses has a safe space to be because of the work and the negotiation that went on. And that is why it was possible for Moses to achieve this connection to God, because there had been this carving of the cleft of the rock because of the tablets. But think of it. Think of the ignobility of leadership in which Moses has to go and face a crowd who, the moment he departs, they start to question, who's our leader? Who is he? He's just a man? What is he? He took us out of Egypt. Big deal. We all went out of Egypt. He made plagues. He didn't make the plagues. The plagues happened. Why is he in charge? And what happens is, they say, because we don't know where this man Moses is. We don't know where he is. And they start to build a golden calf. And they worship a golden calf. Moses had just suffered the greatest ignobility of his leadership, where he left behind a people who he thought adored him, and he thought loved him, and he thought appreciated him, and he comes back and they forgot everything he had done. They treated him like a pariah. So this week we deal with 2 calves, the heifer, the red heifer, and the golden calf. And they come together to teach us that the one who purifies becomes impure. And they teach us that any human being at any time can be replaced by a golden calf. So, the question of leadership and ignobility and loneliness is very much present. And we always wonder, what is the truth? How do people achieve truth? How do communities function? How does religion function? How does God function? How do we know the truth? And the answer is, we don't. There is no absolute truth. It's all perception. And I want to tell you, I was stunned by this article I saw on the BBC this week. A picture, and you can look it up, of a hovering ship. Someone looking out over the North Atlantic takes a photo of a ship that looks like it's floating in the sky. And it's not doctored. It's not a fancy photo. There's no photoshopping. It's exactly what it is. You see the horizon and you see a ship above it, floating. And scientists say, don't get so excited. It's a natural phenomena. It's something that you have to know, and it is called a superior image, a superior mirage. And a superior mirage occurs when there's special atmospheric conditions that bend light. And I'm not a scientist, but to understand it, it says, when weather conditions known as temperature inversion happen, where cold air lies close to the sea with warmer air above it, which is normally the other way around. Normally the sea is warmer than the air in winter. But in this case, the cold air is lower and the warm air is higher. It bends light. And it is possible to see things that are not visible to the horizon over the horizon. And that is called a superior mirage, in which you can actually see what is over the horizon because the light refracts the image as though you were looking over the horizon. But friends, beware the superior mirage in which people believe that their vision is real, even though it is only a mirage over the horizon. And Moses, unfortunately, had to deal with the same thing, the superior mirage, because as the Midrash tells us, why did the people build a golden calf? Well, they had a vision. They had a vision of Moses disappearing into the clouds, and for 40 days and 40 nights, Moses didn't return. And they just accepted that Moses was gone. There was a superior mirage in which they believed that their version of the truth was accurate, even though one day Moses returns to his shock and horror of the abandonment of leadership. So you may have seen this week the article by Professor Jack Wertheimer about will the synagogue survive? And it's a series of articles. If you start looking at it, you'll find there have been articles written for a long time about whether synagogues will survive or not. But specifically, once COVID hit, there were a lot of conversations about it. But Professor Wertheimer's article is seminal. It's really important to read. And it does call for change. And it does talk about all the challenges that we faced before pandemic and what happens for synagogues now, and how different things can be with live, with et cetera, et cetera. There's all kinds of new changes. People will come back. What are we expecting? And I feel now that vaccines are coming, people will be vaccinated, there will be a return to normal. I feel that we are at the moment on the verge of change. I've talked about this change for a long time. I've written about it, podcasted. Change is coming, and the only question is, where will you be in the change? So listen to this incredible story by Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov tells a story to his Hasidim of the king who gets intelligence from his chief medical officer, who tells him that this year's wheat crop is poisoned. This year's wheat crop, anyone who eats it will become insane, will be changed forever. So, of course, they gather all the wise people of the kingdom together, and they decide they're going to buy wheat from elsewhere. But their enemies are all around them, and they can't buy wheat from just anywhere they want. And eventually they figure out they will not be able to buy enough wheat for the entire population, only for the royal family and their administration. And then they realize, if we eat the good wheat, and we stay the way we are, and everyone else eats the contaminated wheat, and they change, well then, we won't fit in and they won't fit in. It's going to be a changed society. We won't be able to relate to the people around us. So they decide maybe that just the king and his family will have the uncontaminated wheat. And that doesn't matter either, because then what's the king going to rule a kingdom who won't understand him? Their language will change, their values, their ideas. What's the point? This wheat is contaminated, and everybody will change. Eventually they decide, we can't avoid eating the contaminated wheat. And we have to, in fact. But what we will do is we'll make a mark behind our ear. And the mark behind our ear will always be a reminder to us. This is not normal. This is because of the wheat. We once were normal, but now we are different. And that mark behind the ear will always stand as a reminder that once it was different and now it is no longer. But we have no choice. And I would not say that we're going back to a bad place. I would say we're going to a different place in which everything's changed, but I want to mark the moment. I want to mark the moment in which we acknowledge that it is changed and it is changed forever. And this is the moment that we should acknowledge that our families will be different, that our grandchildren will be different. I've been talking to a lot of young people lately, and they want a different kind of Judaism. And I think it's going to be hard to get them to go back to what we had before. I think our needs will change. I think what we value most will change. What we value least will change. I think our habits will change. I think our behaviors will change. I think our relationships will change. Our friendships. The importance we put on the rush of life will change. I think our wants will change. Our needs will change. Our motivations will change. Our dreams will change. And our plans will change. And those of you who think it won't change, put a mark behind your ear so you can remember the way it used to be and how now it is going to be different. One of the thoughts that stays with me regularly now, both in terms of leadership and personal life, is this idea presented by Orwell in 1984. George Orwell presents this concept in which he talks about a world in which the past was erased, the erasure was forgotten, and the lie became the truth. If you erase the past, and then you forget that you erased the past, and then you live in your lie, it becomes the truth. Let's not live in the lie. Let's live in our real selves. Be real with yourself. Acknowledge that it is different. Change is here. Start planning it. Don't wait for it to happen. If you harbor the hopes that everything will be normal again, I'm afraid, as I feel, we will all be terribly disappointed. The best thing we can do as Jews, as people, as individuals, is live our best lives fully and not be afraid to change. We don't have to erase the past to have a better future. Now, I think a lot about the future, of course. I think a lot about where it's going. And I was struck by one of the great things that Walter Gretzky, who just passed away, Wayne's father, said. He said he taught Wayne Gretzky, probably the greatest hockey player of all time, or certainly one of them. He said, always go where the puck is going, not where the puck has been. And I think that is exactly what we need to do. We need to ask ourselves, where is the puck going? Because I'll tell you that the song in my head right now is, both in terms of how I feel being on a bima and how it feels with the loneliness of leadership and life in general. You may know the words, everybody's talking at me. I don't hear a word they're saying. Only the echoes of my mind. People stopping, staring. I can't see their faces. Only the shadows of their eyes. That's what it feels like here sometimes. And Harry Nilsson continues and he says, I'm going where the sun keeps shining through the pouring rain. Going where the weather suits my clothes, banking off of the northeast winds, sailing on a summer breeze, and skipping over the ocean like a stone. I'm going where the sun keeps shining. Friends, I want to conclude with a special sign-off. It's the prayer of Rabbi Elimelech of Lezhinsk, Rabbi Elimelech Weisblum of Lezhinsk, who died in 1787, one of the great leaders of the Hasidic movement, a thinker, an Ohev Yisrael, someone who loved people and loved the Jewish people, tried always to exhort people to do better and give of themselves. Here's the prayer sung by Avram Fried, Adarabah. On the contrary, friends, let's not do bad. Let's be great. Shabbat Shalom.